It's been an active mosquito season in terms of finding these pests carrying West Nile virus, Triple E, especially around Cicero Swamp, Toad Harbor, and we're going to have to deal with them for at least a few more weeks until the cold kills them off. And, by the way, tick season's really hitting its high season. So let's bring in Upstate Global Health Director, Dr. Stephen Thomas. Always good to see you. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Jeff. Good to see you.
Let's start with the mosquitoes. It seems certainly like there have been more traps than usual capturing mosquitoes carrying the virus, as we talked about the past couple months. What would you say the threat level really is?
Yeah, so I think, the threat level overall is probably pretty low, right? Just because the planets that have to align for somebody to get bitten by a mosquito that's actually infected and for that infection to then cause disease in a human, it makes the threat level pretty low. However, if you do get infected and if you do get sick from being bit, then the outcomes can be very severe. They can include, permanent neurologic disability and in some cases death. But fortunately, that occurs very rarely.
So take those precautions like we've talked about before, especially dawn, dusk, long sleeves, DEET, etc. There have been some horses that have died from Triple E around here, but there's actually a vaccine for these animals, nothing for humans. And we have been getting questions to the Your Stories team. Why no West Nile or Triple E vaccine for us, people?
Yeah, well, the good news is people have been working on vaccines for both Triple E as well as West Nile virus. Both the United States military as well as the NIH and some academic groups have been working on different candidates, and they're in different phases of development. There have been candidates tested in people, but they've been tested in very small numbers, and they really have not had the level of testing required for the FDA to say, yes, these are safe and effective. And the reason for that is because there just has not been that sort of drive and that sense of urgency to do those types of trials. I will say that it's a very similar story to what we saw with messenger RNA vaccines and COVID, right? People thought these things were developed overnight. No, they had actually been in development for over a decade. There had been multiple tests in human beings, but it wasn't until the pandemic that it actually got its chance to show. So, yeah, I mean, it's the candidates are out there, but until there's some sense of urgency that the government and the funders and industry say, we got to fast track this thing, I think it's going to be a slow road ahead.
Just quick, from what we've seen around here, and we've seen it in other places in the U.S. too, do you think that momentum's picked up any at all or not enough?
Well, I think that just what we call vector-borne diseases. So any kind of diseases transmitted by ticks or mosquitoes or in some areas of the world, chiggers and things of that nature, fleas, they are increasing in terms of how frequently they're making people sick, which makes groups like the CDC and the NIH and others take a little bit more notice. But really, until there's real money put behind this, there are not going to be lots of groups that can afford to work on these problems, and that's just an unfortunate fact of life.
It's a reality. You mentioned ticks. Let's talk about that. High season for them around here, and Lyme disease that they often carry. Why is it important to have ticks tested, and actually, how can people do that around here?
Yeah, so this is the time when the baby ticks grow up to adults and become bigger ticks. And so they need to feed to do that. They need blood, and humans, unfortunately, kind of get in the way of their normal feeding patterns with animals. And so there's more ticks reaching that adult phase. There's more humans that are getting exposed. And because they're adults, people can see them. And so the reports of tick, of being exposed to a tick or finding a tick feeding on you, those reports go up. I think it's really important that the ticks can be tested because it allows us to know, are there new tick species in central New York? And I can tell you there are. Are the ticks infected with germs that can cause disease in humans? Increasingly, yes, that they are. And how do we know that? We know that because people send their ticks in to Dr. Tangamani's lab at the Global Health Institute, and he's able to test them against 17 different germs, and then give that information back to those people so that those people and their clinicians can help make decisions about whether or not they need antibiotics, for example. So I I think it's really important for many reasons that if you find a tick on yourself or your pet, that you get it tested.
Quick, I'm going to sneak this one in. You're also working on a better test for Lyme disease. How can people help out with that?
That has been a real constant frustration, not only for clinicians, but for patients, that we just have not had great tests to determine whether or not somebody has Lyme disease or some other illness. And so the Global Health Group, under the direction of Dr. Chris Polino, we are involved in working with a company to try to develop a better test. But what we need are people who have recently been diagnosed with Lyme disease, have a rash on their skin due to that, and then we need them to call us immediately, because that's kind of the sweet spot of when these tests need to be developed. So, go on to the website at our Global Health Institute Clinical Trials Center if you meet those conditions, and we'd be very happy to talk to you about your opportunities to participate.
Your chance to help. Dr. Thomas, always good to talk to you. We'll catch up again soon.
Thank you, Jeff.